All right, thanks, Tim. Yeah, I just looked at your last mock draft, and you had the Lions taking Duke offensive lineman Graham Barton. What do you like about him?
Yeah, really, I like the versatility. When you start thinking about game day, Jack, I mean, and the roster restrictions that teams have, a guy like Graham Barton started his career at Duke at center, moved out, played the last 3 years at left tackle. Yeah, I think he's a guy who could legitimately play five positions. And when you've got those tough roster decisions on Sundays, having a guy that's that versatile, that you can play inside, but if something happens out at tackle, he can go out there and hold his own, has experience there too. I just think the Lions love those kind of players, those versatile players that can do a lot of different things, and not to mention he's a terrific player, both as a tackle and a center. I just he gives you that kind of versatility, that toughness. He fits what they do up front, and I think it'd be a great selection if he's there at 29.
Looks like this top of this draft, quarterback, quarterback, quarterback. Where does this really get interesting? What's the move that throws this thing up in the air for everybody?
Yeah, for me, it's who's the first defensive player and where does he go? I mean, this could be the first draft in history where a defensive player doesn't go in the top 10. I think there's a real scenario that happens. And look, if you're a team like the Lions who are probably looking more to get some help on defense, I think you're in a terrific situation. I think the quarterbacks, like you mentioned, it's a really, really great wide receiver class. It's a terrific tackle class. I think that's going to dominate the top 10. And you're going to start to see some of those really good defenders, get pushed back. And I think what'll be interesting about this is Brad Holmes and the Lions did a lot of pre-draft work on this cornerback class. And I'm curious if you see, when some of those top guys start to be available 13, 14, 15, 16, start to drop back a little bit, would that be the move that maybe Brad Holmes makes to move up? We saw him do it a couple of years ago with Jamison Williams. If they like a player, he's not afraid to do it. That to me will be interesting. If some of the cornerbacks, some of the edge rushers start to get pushed back in this draft, will Brad Holmes decide to go up and get one? That'll be interesting.
I know he was asked at his pre-draft news conference if he would trade that first round pick. Do you foresee a scenario? Would he move out of that first round spot in front of the Detroit home crowd there?
Yeah, he apologized ahead of time, so that's been taken care of. But I certainly do see a scenario there, especially if maybe one of those quarterbacks like Michael Penix or Bo Nix is still there at the end of the first round, and maybe a quarterback needy team wants to move back in and get that quarterback with a fifth-year option. I think what it's going to take is if Brad Holmes sees a group of players, 5 to 10 players, that he's got similarly graded on his board, and he can gain an asset by moving back and still get one of those guys, I think it's a win-win scenario. Not for the fans here in Detroit, I know, but they'll have a few pops, I'm sure, in their system by then, and they'll be soon to forget. And look what Brad has done in with day two picks, right? I mean, the Sam Laportas and the Brian Branches just recently. If you can get another day two pick, move back a little bit, and still get a guy that's in that grade at the top of your board, I wouldn't be surprised at all if they make that move, Jack.
Why has he been so good? Like, we're not used to it. We've seen so many failures in the draft in Detroit. Why has Holmes been so good?
I think he's got a philosophy and he sticks to it. I think where teams get in trouble sometimes is they say, oh, I got to come out of this draft with a cornerback, or I got to come out of this draft with this position. And you take and you look at prospects at that position instead of taking maybe a better football player. And that's never been, Brad's philosophy. He trusts his board, he trusts his pre-draft process, and he selects the best players. I think last year was a great example. Getting a running back at 12, people thought that wasn't great value. Getting a linebacker at 18, what do? You don't get running backs and off-ball linebackers there. No, they were players that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell loved. They were Lions guys. They fit what they do. And that's why he's been successful, because he doesn't worry about positions. He just gets the best football player on his board, and he's filling this roster with good football players, and he'll figure it out after that.
We did learn he's keeping score a little bit, just a little bit.
Keep it score a little bit. Hey, he's ahead. So you can do that when you're winning, right?
Yes, you can. JJ McCarthy, do you see any chance he's sliding, or is he in the top 5, 10 picks?
Yeah, I'd be a little bit surprised if he dropped. He was one of the most impressive people I thought at the combine. You know, we go to the combine, we get to interview all these guys. He just has a presence about him. He's a winner. You know, somebody asked him, you know, you don't have the stats as some of the other quarterbacks in these draft. What do you think about that? And he says, I don't care about stats. I care about wins. And we got plenty of those at Michigan. I thought it was a great answer. And that's the kind of player you're getting, right? I think he was great at his pro day. He's kind of got that winning pedigree, that moxie. I like him. I think he's a top 10 pick, and I think somebody will move up for him, whether it's Minnesota, Denver, somebody. Don't be surprised if JJ McCarthy's in the top 10.
Tim, is this the draft where Michigan sets the record for all time most players taken in a draft?
Yeah, they could. There's a lot of good ones there. You know, you're going to see a lot of them. You know, besides JJ McCarthy, you know, Colson could get himself into the first round, but I think those guys are going to dominate day two when you talk about the running backs and some of the defensive linemen. Sanders still the cornerback. I think all those guys are going to be day two guys. You're going to hear Michigan heavy on day two.
Last thing, give me, if you could, a couple of names you think you could see selected by the Lions in the next couple of days.
Yeah, like you mentioned off the top, I mocked, you know, Graham Barton there. Jackson Powers Johnson is another interior guy. Zach Frazier, interior offensive lineman from West Virginia. You know, 4-year high school wrestling champion, kind of a Dan Campbell type guy. You know, when you're talking cornerbacks, I think Kool-Aid McKinstry is a guy that could be sitting there. You know, edge rusher. You know, Chop Robinson from Penn State, interesting prospect. You didn't have a ton of production, but the measurables and the athletic traits certainly fit. So, you know, those are a few names I think that are right there. I wouldn't be surprised if they go receiver and a receiver's at the top of their board. This is probably the best wide receiver, you know, class in the last decade. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if you're sitting there at 29 and one of those guys is the best player at his board. So look, the Lions are in a great spot, excuse me. You know, Brad's got the best roster he's had going into the draft, and he can just really let it play out, and he can move up, he can move back, he can select at 29. They're in a great spot, and it should be a fun weekend.
Last thing for you, Amon-Ra St. Brown just got he just got paid.
Yeah.
How important was it for them to lock this up before this draft starts? And when do we see something, if at all, with Jared Goff?
Yeah, you know, it was important for St. Brown because he's what this team is all about, you know, in terms of what he does on the field, but off the field, the work ethic, the community. He's everything that this team talks about in terms of the kind of guys that they want in this football team. So, you know, when a guy comes in, he does his job, he gets rewarded accordingly. I think that sends a message throughout the organization, throughout the locker room too, that look, if we come in, put our head down, do the work like St. Brown did, you know, you'll get rewarded. And I think that's important. In terms of Goff, I would expect that to be done, Jack. I'd really be surprised if it doesn't get done. Maybe not before the draft, but I think sometime in the summer. I would expect it sometime before the season starts. I know some of those have happened in training camp before, but we could also see, you know, a Penei Sewell, I think, and maybe even an Ali McNeil too. So there could be a few more extensions coming down the line here.
Tim, thank you very much. Really appreciate you finding some time for us.
Yeah, anytime, Jack. Have a good one.